This is a footstool I made Mary a while back, and it sits here in front of her chair. And she says she likes this footstool, but she rocks it back towards her and puts her feet up against it at an angle. She says she wouldn't mind having one that doesn't have to rock. Hello, my name's Bob Miller. It's always good to see you here in my workshop. Our current project is that new footstool for Mary that I mentioned earlier. Over here sits a piece of styrofoam. That's Mary's template to tell me how high she wants that bench to be. She wants it to be that tall, which includes the top, I might add, and she wants it to be at that angle. The width hasn't got anything to do with it. I think the width is going to be dictated by how much of this board I can save. Over here, I've glued together some pieces for the sides. I guess it's time to start trying to cut out. I don't have any plans, so I'm going to have to make it up as we go. Stick around to the end of the video and I'll give you a cut list. I have to figure out what that cut list is first. I let Mary pick out the piece of lumber she wanted to use for her new table, and she picked out this piece of walnut. There's only one problem. I think she picked it out because it's live edge. At least it's live edge on one side. On the other side, it's not. So I'm going to have to do something about that. We want that tabletop to be about 15.5 inches long. And if I measure out here to 15.5, the board has started to narrow. So I'm a little concerned about how wide my base can be, but I think I have a solution for that. Over here, I'm going to square off the end and save as much of the board as I can. Not because I'm worried about how much length I've got, but the further down the board I go, the more narrow the width is going to be. So I want to save as much of the wide end as I can. Now I want 15.5 inches. And there's the beginning of our top. Out here at my most narrow end, I'm about 8 3/4. So that means that my side pieces can't be any wider than 8 3/4, and in reality, they got to be a little bit less than that. Right now they're 11. So I need to take about an inch off and the kerf of the saw blade on each side, leaving my seam where I glued them together right down the middle. Now I'm going to make them 8 3/4. And then we'll kind of sneak in on how wide they actually need to be. Well, they could stand to be just a tad narrower. So I think I'm going to take just a little strip off of them further. Now what I want to do is to transfer this angle onto these boards. I don't have to worry too much about the height. As you can see, I'm just about the same as this, but I still got to put the top on it. So it's going to be a little shorter than this when I get through. Now I want them to be 14 inches long. So let me turn them around this way, get back to 90 degrees. And that should be my size. This is an Adirondack stool that I made a while back. And in order to give Mary's new stool a little bigger footprint, so that it's a little more stable, I think I'm going to put a foot on the stool similar to what's on here. The question is how long do I need to make it? The center post on Mary's stool is 8.5 inches wide at the moment, and then there's a rail on this one that's another inch each side, and then a little room for that 45 out on the end. So I'm thinking about 12 inches. I changed my mind about how long I want that foot to be. I think I'm going to make it 12 and a half. That allows 8.5 inches for the side pieces over there. That allows an inch on each side for the runner, and it allows an inch to put the 45 on the top corner. Rip it approximately in half. That's going to be 2 3/4 inches. Well, I read someplace that's better to be consistent than accurate. That's not quite 2 3/4 inches. This one's is, so we're going to make them the same. Now on the feet, I'm going to try to add a little personality to them by cutting a little bit of a reveal there. I'm going to come in 2 inches on each side. Then I'm going to find the center, and the center should be at about 6 1/4 and a tad more. I'm going to bring it up 1 inch. And what I'm going to do is to cut a angle on that to create 2 little feet, 2 inches long out here, and then the center up that direction. I need a straight edge. Okay, let's take it over to the bandsaw and see if we can do a reasonable job of cutting that out. I'm going to cut a relief piece to the center to start with. And then come at that from both directions. I've decided to try to make this edge a raw edge looking edge that it'll take too much width off of the board. So what I'm going to do is try to square it up over at the joiner. Changed my mind about what I'm going to do about the live edge on the back side of the top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to steal the live edge off of the other end of the board. I've got the other end of the board clamped down to a straight piece of wood. Actually, it's MDF. And I've got the saw set up so that it's just a little bit more than the width of my board. And I've got the board lined up so that it's taken off the live edge and should leave a straight edge that'll glue onto the other side of my top. We'll try it out. And there's me a piece of live edge. Okay, let's glue it up. I think I'll put the glue on this side. I noticed that the color doesn't exactly match up like I would have hoped it would, but I think it'll be all right. Once it's sanded down and finished, it won't be too terribly noticeable. It kind of looked like end grain. Okay. Now, what I want to do is out here on this edge, to make sure the two pieces line up, is to put one of these Craig clamps on it to force it to match at the top. Okay, I think that width is about right, so let's get some pressure on it going this way. I don't think I want to put tons of pressure on it, because that'll make it want to bow. Okay. Plus, I don't want to crush the live edge any. Okay. So you tried to bow just then. Okay, that's got that clamp pretty level. See, I got another one. Let me try putting it on the other side. Well, that's going to take some sanding, I'm afraid. We can get this one more flat. Well, that's better. Well, we'll see how well that turns out. It's going to take some sanding, but I think we can get it flat. There it is, all glued up. Time will tell how it turns out. I've never tried doing this before, but we'll see if it works. Well, the glue's had time to dry. Let's see what we got. We got one stuck. Well, it's going to take a little sanding, but I think it'll work out. For the skirts on the front and the back to flush up against the top, they had to have an angle on them that's the same angle as the angle on the sides. So I have this, I don't even know what you call this device, but you can adjust what the angle is. I got the angle off the sides, turn the table saw blade to that angle after removing the zero clearance insert and putting the standard insert back in, and ripped the skirts for the front and the back down and got this angle on it. It seems to match up just fine. Before I go any further, I'm going to start doing a little sanding and shaping, because it's starting to get pretty tedious about which pieces go where. I'm going to start with the top, and you notice I got a little edge sticking out, plus that end of the board I'm kind of iffy about, so I'm going to take a little bit off of that and square it off. That's going to remove a little bit of this bad spot out here, but I'm going to try to repair that bad spot by grinding it down some and see if I can't match it up to the live edge that's out here. And that section of the board is the widest, so I can sacrifice a little distance. The top of the board's a little bit irregular shaped, so I'm just going to have to guess at making it parallel. And I think I'm going to square up this side just a tad. I think I may do that with the sander. We'll see how this new sander works. I believe that looks better. What I'm going to try to do is to clean up that spot. If it'll focus, it's a little notch in there, and I think what I can do is take the angle grinder with a sanding disc on it and grind that down just a little bit. And as I said, this end is slightly wider than the other end anyway, so let's see how it works. Now I'm just going to go ahead and sand down the rest of the top and try to get it in its final state. I'm going to start with 60 grit because I got to smooth out this place where I joined the second live edge on it, and the board's pretty rough, and then work my way up to about 180, 220, somewhere in that area. Here's the top after all sanding out. I think it turned out looking pretty good. And there is that edge that I fixed with the grinder, and I think it looks pretty good. You can't really tell where I ground down and where the live edge starts. After getting the top sanded down, I've decided that I'm going to take a little bit more off of these sides and take them down to 7 1/4. I think that'll just exactly be enough support and still leave a little overhang. I got the table saw already set up for 7 1/4, so let's get some up. I've decided that my feet are too wide. So I'm going to take 1 inch off of each side. That'll still leave a 1 inch foot, and I think that's going to be plenty, and it's going to make it more the right width for the tabletop. I've set up a stop block so that I can get a uniform setting. I want to add a 45 out here on the end of the feet, just to add a little personality. And I've decided about 3/4 of an inch is about right. And now we got a little 45 out there. So now I got to decide how high I want these edges to be. And in order to bring them up over this groove, they're going to have to be 1 inch up. And I've got a couple of 1, 2, 3 blocks sitting here. There is the inch that they got to set up. So that's about where they will sit. Here's my piece of styrofoam. If I lay it up here, the overhang is going to be, take the top of the table out to about here, and right now they're just about even, which isn't leaving any room for the top. So I think I got to take 1 inch for the 1, 2, 3 bars off, and the tabletop is not quite 1 inch. I believe it started out as 4/4, but I've planed it down to 7/8. So I think I'm going to take approximately 1 7/8 off of the side bars. Okay, that looks about right. Now I want to put a slot in the side just for aesthetic purposes. I've got a Forstner bit set up. I've got my slot laid out. I'm going to drill as much of it as I can and then try to square it off with a chisel and sand it off with the drum sander. I got enough drilled out that I can actually sand this groove smooth without having to use the chisel. So we'll give it a try. Yep, that actually worked rather nicely. I want to round over some of the edges. I'm going to do that over here at the router table with a round over bit. The router does a nice job of rounding them over, but they still need a little sanding on the edges. And what really needs rounding over and sanded on the edges is my little slot that I put in the sides. I can't get the router in there to do a decent job, so I just wrap a piece of sandpaper around the stick and just ease off the edges a little bit. Let's talk some measurements. This is the underneath side of my stool top, and because it's live edge, it's not necessarily uniform. At the most narrow point, it is 10¼ inches wide, and at the widest point, it's 10½ inches wide. If you're using lumber, you'll have to decide how wide you want yours to be. Its overall length is 15 inches. These are the feet. Now let's start with almost all of the wood that I made this stool out of was 4/4. There are a couple of pieces that were only 3/4, and 3/4 is the more common width, but 4/4 is what I had. So if you're using 3/4, you're going to have to adjust your sizes a little bit. These feet are 10½ inches long. They're 2½ inches wide. The little 45 off the corner is 3/4 inch from the top and the edge. The groove, the V in the middle, centers at the halfway point and is 1 inch up from the bottom, and it starts 1 inch from each edge and goes straight to the center. The sides are 5¼ inches wide. At the highest point, it is 12 inches up, and to the lower point, it's 7½ inches to produce the angle that was desired. Now it's time to start assembly. I'm going to attach the sides to the feet, and this is by far the most critical placement of anything because everything else is going to be built on that. I have measured 1 inch up from the bottom of the feet and placed some marks. I want it to be exactly in the center. I'm going to attach it with a little bit of glue and some very nice finish screws. I think the combination of those two is going to be plenty sturdy. There's a better look at the screws I'm using. So, let's give it a whirl. I don't think it's going to take a lot of glue. I'm not really concerned about the glue coming out. I just want it to help support the screws. Okay, we're just dead on our lines right there. We're dead on side by side. I think we just slipped a little off over here. Back on our lines. Good shape over here. Let's get a screw in. Okay, we got a side attached. Looks like I could tighten down on the screws just a tad more. I want to make sure that I'm not going through. No, I got plenty of room. I think I'm going to tighten those on down by hand. I'm going to attach the top to the sides using some Craig screws. I've got out my Craig screw jig here. And I'll be honest with you, I've never done it on an angle like this, but I don't see why it won't work. This piece is 2.5 inches wide and 10.5 inches long, and it goes right there on either side. I've got this one clamped into place so that I can screw it into place. Well, there we have the base. Now to get the skirts put on and the top put on. The skirts are 2.5 inches wide. These are the front and back skirts, and of course they need to have an angle in order to flush up against the base. And My base was 10.5 inches wide down here at the bottom, but it wasn't 10.5 inches wide at the top. So what I had to do was to spread it apart so that it's 10.5 both places. Well, the front skirts are now installed, front and back skirts. Now for the sides. I had to take the top skirts off and plane them down. They're now only 1/2 inch wide. Without doing that, the base was too wide for the top. Somehow I miscalculated. Now for some sides. Now the side rails are on. As far as size, you're just going to have to sneak up on them because you're going to have to custom fit them to where the rest of your base is at. Now to put the top on. Now to attach the top. Because my top is live edge, you can't be exactly precise because it's not a uniform size. But I think I've got the base positioned about where I want it at, and I'm going to attach it with Kreg screws, as I mentioned earlier. Well, there sits the finished stool. I'm going to glue a little cord on the underneath side of the feet to add a little cushion. I'm going to do that with CA glue. Well, there it is. I hope she likes it. Time to start applying some finish. I'm going to use some wipe-on poly. I'll put several coats. Then we'll see how it looks after that. There it is with the first coat of finish on it. Only about 4 or 5 more to go. The stool has been placed into service. I believe it's going to work.